the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week.
Hi, I'm Dr. John DeMartini, and this is the story of the week.
Oh wow, Dr. John DeMartini.
You wanted business story? You wanted business story of the week?
Oh yeah, you missed Business Story of the Week.
Let me
Okay,
do it again.
let's do that one again. Let's do it again. Don't worry. So after the clap, then do it again.
Hi, I'm Dr. John DeMartini, and this is the business story of the week.
Fantastic. And that is Dr. John DeMartini, the man of the hour. And of course, I am your host, as usual, on every episode and every show. And today's question is, what is the secret to uncovering the hidden order? The hidden order in the chaos of everyday life. Well, Dr. John is the perfect man to answer that question for us. And he's going to share his insight, his perspective, and much, much deeper more. And all of that, Dr. John DeMartini is a renowned human behavior specialist, author, and educator known for creating the DeMartini method, a revolutionary tool for personal transformation. With over 3,650 books studied and a presence in over 100 countries, he offers seminars, corporate programs, and keynotes, synthesizing wisdom from history's greatest minds. His signature program, The Breakthrough Experience, and his best-selling book have impacted over 100,000 people worldwide. Dr. DeMartini's work focuses on empowering individuals to master their lives through understanding their values and the hidden order in the universe. I am very, very excited for this show and to get the perspective, wisdom, and insight from Dr. John. Doctor, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. It's very inspiring to be here.
Well, Dr. John, you have quite lived an inspired life yourself as well. And of course, it's a lot of in-depth stuff that we can talk about, a lot to unravel. But I'd like to begin with the beginning. We begin with the journey in mind where it all began. What was the young Dr. John DeMartini like? Did he always think about the hidden order of the universe? Did the young Dr. John DeMartini always know he was going to live on a boat for 23 years?
No, I didn't have that idea initially.
Interesting.
The answer is yes, though. When I was 18 years old, I had a dream to master life.
Wow.
I watched a movie in America called Kung Fu with David Carradine, and he kept referring to a Chinese master, martial arts master. And I thought, wow, I'd like to master my life. I want to be a master of what I do.
Interesting.
And so I set out to, what exactly is a mastery of life? And I broke life into 7 areas: an intellectual pursuit and quest, to create original ideas that serve human beings across the world, to create a global business, to create a financial independence, to create a global family. I want to create a social influence around the world. I want to be vital and energized to a ripe age. And I want to be inspired and create an inspiring movement. So to me, that was mastering life. So I set out to do that. And also at 18, I read a book by Leibniz, the German philosopher. And he talked about a hidden order, a perfection of the universe. And I thought, that sounds really amazing. So I wanted to know what was the hidden order in apparent chaos.
Right.
Now, Stephen Wolfram, who's a mathematician, says that chaos and disorder is missing information. And the hidden order is reclaiming and becoming aware of that information. So the quality of our life is basically the questions we ask. If we ask amazing questions to make us fully aware of our surroundings and our experiences, and not biased and not partial in our awareness, we see the hidden order in the apparent chaos. So I've developed methodologies to ask questions to help people become aware of things they overlooked in their initial perception. and allows them to see things on the way, not in the way, so they actually be grateful for life instead of ungrateful. And instead of burdened by baggage, they're fueled by opportunity.
I love that. On the way, in the way, uh, on the way, not in the way, fueled by opportunities. I love that. Doctor, just so much to unravel on there. First of all, I'd love to lay the groundwork for our audience and listeners right here. Talk to us a little bit about this hidden order, the hidden order that you've made your life's mission to uncover, to make sense of, and now you're teaching this. Of course, there's chaos right now. Chaos everywhere, I think, has always existed in the world, in the universe, everywhere in our lives. But you say that there's an hidden order in all of that and you've come to unravel it. Doctor, what does that mean? What is the hidden order behind all of this chaos?
Well, we have two areas in our brain, the cortical and the subcortical.
Mm-hmm.
The subcortical area of the brain, predominantly the amygdala and hippocampus, is involved in survival.
Okay.
And it wants to avoid predator and seek prey. It wants to eat but not be eaten. The executive center, the forebrain, the cortical area of the brain, is a self-governing center where we transcend the fear of starvation and the fear of being eaten.
Okay.
And that one is the thrival center.
Thrival.
It is able to see both sides at the same time. And the one below is subjectively biased and only sees one side. We tend to accentuate the positives or the negatives in order to capture the prey and to avoid the predator, instead of seeing simultaneously both sides, the positive negatives equally.
Wow, I love that.
When we intuitive questions to help us see the side we're ignoring, let's say that we're infatuated with somebody. We're a young guy that's interested in a girl, or a girl interested in a guy, or whatever the gender is, and you're now infatuated with them. You're conscious of their upside, unconscious of their downside, and blind to the downsides. If you resent somebody, you're conscious of the downside, unconscious of the upside, and blind to the upsides. As long as we do, we now have the amygdala running us. We're seeking and avoiding. We have impulses and instincts, and we're distracted by those, and they occupy space and time in our mind, and we have this chaotic state of mind because we're externally impacted instead of internally driven. But if we ask questions to show the downside to what we're infatuated with, so we're no longer infatuated, we actually can love the individual whole. And we see the upsides to what we think is down and bring them back into balance. The moment they come to a perfect balance and we see both sides simultaneously, we now see the order and the why things are happening. Beforehand, we're basically externally driven with an impulse and instinct, but when we actually see them both sides. Now, it was 1897 that Wilhelm Wundt, who's the father of experimental psychology, said that when we see simultaneous contrast, both sides simultaneously, we're poised, we're present, we're purposeful, we're prioritized, and we're patient, and we're productive. And that's what the hidden order is. The hidden order is asking questions to reveal what you've overlooked so you can see both sides of an event, so you're not emotionally reacting. You're inspired, and with reason, you're moving forward towards an objective.
With reason, you are moving towards an objective. It's almost like overcoming that primal instinct, so to speak. Like we're always wired to survive. We're always wired to. That's why we fear things. We fear the unknown. We fear trying out things. We fear things that what might makes us successful, because it's just wired in us to survive. I love that we also have that ability to look at everything. It's just more like the human ability, the uniqueness of us to look at the things.
Exactly. Aristotle said the distinction between the animals and the human is that we were able to extract meaning out of our existential world.
I love that.
Instead of being trapped by the impulses and instincts of the affective nature, the animal nature within.
I love that. Wow. I love that, but of course it's difficult, right? Because we've been so used to just follow our primal brain, our emotions, and because we've lived so long. It allowed us to evolve up to this point to have this kind of cognition, this thinking, and everything, and all of that. And of course, it's natural to lean to that ability of ours. But it's also holding us back now today, especially today in our time where more executive thinking. We need to thrive, not just survive. I think we're done with the surviving part. We need to thrive. Doctor, you talk about asking the right questions. You talk about the ability to now start unraveling the hidden order for us individually. As an individual, and for all our audience and listeners here, now that we've you've laid the groundwork for us that we have the ability to thrive, what are questions, Doc? What are the right questions to ask, and how do we ask them every day? What do we know of the right questions to ask? How do we even ask them?
Well, that's been my job. I've been putting those together
That's
for
it.
the last
Hmm.
52 years since I've
Wow.
been teaching.
Wow.
Um,
Uh-huh.
but let's just say this. There are two forms of distress known.
Distress.
Only
Okay.
two. The
Wow.
two forms
Two.
of distress are the perception of loss of something we seek and the
Okay.
perception of gain of something we want to avoid.
Oh, wow.
If
Okay.
you take any form of stress you've ever had in your life, it boils down to those two. There's only two. The
Oh.
perception of loss of something you're seeking. So if you're searching for money and you have a
Mm-hmm.
perception of loss of money, you're
Mm-hmm.
distressed.
Yes.
If
Wow.
you or the perception of gain of what you're trying to avoid. If bills come in, you're trying to avoid the bills and you're trying to find the money. So the loss of money or
Mm,
the gain of bills, both are distressful. If you're
wow.
infatuated with somebody, you fear their loss. If you resent somebody,
Yes.
you fear their gain. So
Wow.
the body and the amygdala and the hippocampus, the amygdala is assigning the valency of positive and negative perceptions to each
Exactly.
event. The
Exactly.
second we label something positive or negative, we fear its loss or fear its gain.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing we identify, that means that anything that's the source of distress is something we're seeking or avoiding, something we're infatuated with or resent, something we
Yes.
admire or despise, something
Yeah.
we like or dislike. So anytime we perceive ourselves being attached, these were called the Buddhist attachments.
Yes.
Anything we get attached to, if we stop and ask this question, what
Mm-hmm.
specific trait, action, or inaction
Mm-hmm.
do I perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating that I admire most or despise most, or like
Okay.
most or dislike most, or seek
Mm-hmm.
most or avoid most?
Wow.
And narrow it down so you're really concise on what it is that your brain has done. Because the amygdala assigns valency to the hippocampus and stores it in episodic memories that are very specific on time and space. Even though we
Mm-hmm.
generalize them and distort them and create
Yeah.
chaos, they're very
Mm-hmm.
specific. It's in a specific event that initiated the reaction. Once we identify what is that we're
Uh-huh.
infatuated with, or resentful, or seeking, or avoiding, we then go and ask a reflective awareness question. Now,
Reflective
John,
awareness.
go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the same specific trait, action, or inaction that you admired or despised in them. And you identify where
Oh.
you've done the behavior, where you did it, when you did it, who'd you do it to, and who perceives you doing it. And
Oh.
you
Wow.
lock in and document through reflective awareness the realization that we only judge things on the outside that represent a part of us on the inside we have not seen both sides to and haven't loved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we
Mm-hmm.
resent somebody, it's because they're reminding us of something we've done in the past. We're ashamed of it. We're too proud by dissociation to face it. So we then point our finger at them, but have three back at ourselves. And the
Yes.
same thing we admire. We admire it
Mm.
in them, but we're too humble to admit it. And anything
Yes.
we're too proud or too humble to admit that we see in others inside ourselves keeps us in an imposter syndrome. It keeps us
Wow.
distorting our reality of who we are. And that disempowers us. Instead of having
Yes.
reflective awareness where the seer, the seeing, and the seen are the same. So we
Wow.
go in there and ask him, and we identify where we do it until the quantity and quality of our doing is equal to what we've judged. And so we realize that what we're judging is really not them. It's our perceptions of ourself being projected. So
Wow.
once we do that, we go to another question. That's the first
Yes,
two
please.
questions.
That's the first
The third
question. Oh
question,
my goodness. Okay.
the third question is, Go to a moment where and when you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating the specific trait, action, or inaction that you admire or despise most. So go into the moment where you
Okay.
actually, okay, because you got to make sure there's a fact there and not fictitious stuff that you make up about people.
Of course.
Where and
Of
when.
course.
Now, at that moment, if you're resenting it, you ask now, how specifically has that served me, benefited me? How's it advantage that I experienced that? How's it helped me spiritually, intellectually, business, financial, family, social, and physical? How did it help me fulfill my highest value and what I feel my mission and primary objective is in life?
Mm-hmm.
And you hold yourself accountable and find it. And I've been doing that on about 125,000 people, and I've got 10,000 people out there doing it with other thousands of people. So we have millions of people that have gone through this.
Wow.
And in the process of doing that, we can find the answer if they look, but they're too proud sometimes to want to look. Our pride makes us want to protect our ego from facing the truth of our reality. So we go in there and find the benefits to it. Once the benefits, as we stack the benefits up, once we find the benefits equaling the drawbacks, the original judgment melts away. And once we find out, we realize that, wait, this is not something that I need to avoid. This is something that's serving me. This is helping me mature and face the truth of my life and helping me grow. And the challenges sometimes makes me precociously independent, more entrepreneur-like. And if I admire somebody, I have to find out where I have that same behavior, because the people that support me keep me juvenilely dependent and they rob me of accountability sometimes. So I bring those back into balance until it is neither positive nor negative. So the judgment's dissolved and we have reflective awareness. So those are the first three. There's 80 questions. The first three.
Wow, but that is fascinating, Doc. First of all, let me recap that real quickly because we're trying to achieve this sense of equilibrium. We are trying to avoid both distresses to come to a point of reflective awareness. And I think this is what we lose. We do not have the ability to break down our thoughts, our emotions, why we think this way, and because we just don't have the ability of that reflective awareness. You mentioned
We have the ability, we don't have the habit.
that's it. Ready to go. Much better to put it. We don't have the habit. We just didn't flex or exercise that muscle enough in order to apply it in our daily lives. You mentioned 80 questions, doctor, but I feel like you just gave us the three most crucial questions, and I feel like that just the way you just said those three questions, I feel like I've solved my life already. But for a lot of individuals out there, I feel like just applying these three questions really will take us to that sense of reflective awareness and allow us to have a more fulfilling life, to break down that chaos, find that order in our lives. Doc, allow me to recap these real quickly because third, you talked about the third one was being in the moment, knowing where and when, or the being or the person where you find these values in, and that moment, how did that moment serve me? Now, could you give us real quickly the two other moments, the first two moments, or the first two questions where we can achieve this reflective awareness?
First, you identify the individual that you have a judgment on.
Individual, you have
The
a
second
judgment. This
is then
includes you.
identify what. Well, ultimately, it's going to be you. It's a reflection of you. See, but you're going to project your judgments onto other people, thinking it's about them when you start. You know, Epictetus, the Greek philosopher, said, when people start on their personal development journey, first they blame and give credit to things on the outside. As they go down the journey, they start giving credit and blame to things on the inside. When they finalize their journey and become aware of who they are and authentic, they realize there's nothing to give credit or blame to. There's just something to be present with.
Nobody. That's it. That's it. That's it. I love it. And then we're trying to achieve that. We're trying to achieve external, internally,
A
but then if
transcendent awareness, transcendent to the moral hypocrisies that we get trapped in.
wow, transcendent awareness. And that's just again a sort of equilibrium of a reflective awareness where you're not judging yourself. You're not judging yourself, but it's just or them. It's just how it is. And we need to start practicing that. We need to flex that muscle every day. Doc, what was the second question? Help us recap this.
The second question is go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the same specific trait, action, inaction you judge.
I see. Okay, that was
there's a quote in the biblical New Testament. Not that I use that as my reference by any means, but it just happens to be that old, 2,000 years. And it basically says, beware of judging other people, for you to do the same thing.
Of
And
course.
that's been found to be true.
All the
40
time.
years ago, I went to the Oxford English Dictionary, and I realized that what I was judging in other people were me. I realized in my own life. So instead of waiting for people to push my buttons for me to judge them, I decided to go to the Oxford English Dictionary. And I went in there and I literally went through the entire dictionary and line by line through all the words, because I love words, particularly
Okay. Okay.
etymologies of words. And I underlined every human behavioral trait I could find in that book. There were 4,628 traits that I found. In that book, outside to the margin, I wrote the initials of the individual that I believed
Okay.
was the most extreme example of that behavior. So if I saw
Interesting.
inconsiderate or considered or kind or cruel, I thought, who
Whoa.
is it that I know in my experience that's most cruel or most kind or most this that I labeled? I wrote
Wow.
their name out there. And then I
Right.
looked inside myself. All right, John, find out where you do the same behavior equal to what the most extreme person that you've judged. And I went through 4,628 traits. I found out I had every one of them. There was nothing missing in me. I had kind and cruel and nice and mean and positive and negative and peaceful and wrathful and honest and dishonest. And I had every trait that I found in that book. And then I
Right.
realized that who am I to judge?
Right.
When I'm looking at them and I'm reacting, it's only because I have a disowned part within myself that I'm not wanting to
Yes.
face. When I
Yes.
finally face
Absolutely.
that, I end up appreciating them for making me aware that that's another part of myself that I learned to love. Because people want to be loved for
Fantastic.
who they
That's
are, but they can't do
of
it as
course.
long as they're putting on an imposter syndrome
Of
and
course.
covering
Of course.
themselves up with prides and shames.
Wow. So it's important to put yourself again in that moment and to determine that these things, like you look at them, you see them in people. But I love how you connected that, by the way, with you be careful because you might be doing this, but it's also there's a lesson to learn in there. I love that
It's not
second
a might.
portion.
It's not a might be doing it. Where
Not
is
in
it?
my
When is it?
absolutely.
The might
Absolutely.
is in a presumption, and you can
See,
dodge the responsibility. It's
that is
not a matter
true.
of if you've done it, it's a matter of where and when you've done it. Every human
Absolutely.
being's got every trait. That's the big wake up call.
Mm-hmm.
People go
Mm-hmm.
around and we think, well, I've improved and I avoided that. You don't need to get rid of any
Mm-hmm.
part of yourself to love yourself.
I
That's what
love
a lot
that.
of people do. They're caught in a moral hypocrisy to be nice, never mean, kind, never cruel, positive, never negative. And then they
Right.
try to be one sided and they can't. It's like trying to get a
They
one
can.
sided magnet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, see, if you support my values, I can be nice as a pussycat. You challenge my
Of course.
values, yeah, I can be mean as a tiger.
Of course.
I'm
Of course.
both. I'm not one sided. But
Right.
trying to be
Right.
one sided will repress and suppress half of you and then
Yeah.
make you blame other people that because you don't want to face that about yourself. And then you'll want to
Yeah.
avoid the part of you and them that you don't want
And
to
them.
face because of moral hypocrisies. And then what you're doing is you're holding yourself back from opportunities because you need all of that to grow.
I
You need
love
it
that. I
all.
love it. You need it all. You need it all. And I go back to the flexing muscle, right? Because I told you literally just like it might be, but it's not a might. Like it's not a might. It definitely is in there. And I feel like that reflects everyone else because we just don't practice this enough. We don't think that that judgment always exists. We don't think that we always judge people, but it is there. The judgment that we make of others is definitely a judgment that we have of ourselves. That's why we see it, literally.
That's
Doc,
been known.
mhm,
That's been known for
known,
centuries.
known for
No, it's nothing
centuries,
new.
but we never really quite learn it. We never really quite get familiar with it. No one teaches that.
No, we're sold. Paul Dirac, the Nobel Prize winner, in a
Mm,
1947 book called The
please,
Principles
please.
of Quantum Mechanics, said,
Mhm.
it's not that we don't know so much, it's that we know so much that isn't so. The truth has
Oh,
never been in the hands of the masses. It's always been in the hearts of the masters. The
mm,
majority of people
mm,
love the amygdala, and the amygdala wants to avoid pain and seek pleasure. So it's a
mm.
hedonistic pursuit, a passionate pursuit of that which is unobtainable and trying to avoid that which is unavoidable. And that is the
Fascinating.
source of human suffering, as the Buddha said.
Yes,
So
yes,
wisdom is transcending the trap that the amygdala imposes in survival to thrive and to be
yes,
able to be objective and to see both sides and embrace both sides. This was called the virtue, the golden virtue, the golden mean by Aristotle. So we know this for centuries, but the majority of people are
centuries.
just interested in a quick fix. They want immediate
That's true.
gratification. That's why most people are not wealthy. You don't find that most people are highly, Nobel Prize winners. Majority of people are not willing to do the due diligence and the discipline to be authentic. And they have the fear of they have to put on a facade in order to survive because of fear of rejection. And that traps people.
That's trap. It is a trap. It is a trap, and we see it every day. It's being trapped by everyone. We just don't. We want to stick with our amygdala, like you said. We want to stick to that quick fix, that quick pain pleasure. It's just so much easier. Doc, the
You're
third
not going to
question
build
again.
business. You're not
Mhm.
going to build business. You're not going to build wealth with immediate gratification.
That's
You're
true.
going to do it by deferring gratification and dedicating your life to be of service to people and dedicating your life to invest in buying assets that
Of
accumulate
course.
instead of immediate gratifying consumables that.
Wow, Doc, Doc. If I haven't, if I wasn't already sold to your book, I want to buy it now. I want to invite everyone else to have and read all of this and just learn everything that you have for us to teach, Doc. I'm glad that we had this longer call now and an opportunity for a longer call because there's a lot to unravel. I want to unravel more. Doc, recap to us that third question, and I'd love to get this unraveling, continuing
The third
unraveling.
question is, when we have an event in our life that we think is
Hmm.
terrible, a day, a week, a month, if year or 5 years later, we look back and go, wow, I'm very grateful that occurred. I can see now it catalyzed my growth or my
Yeah.
opportunities. So why have the wisdom of the ages with the aging process and you can have the wisdom of the ages without it? Why not ask questions? What are the upsides and benefits now instead of waiting 10 years to find it? So
Yes.
that the answers are there. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, 40 years. I've been doing the method with people clinically. And I
Mhm.
assure you, they can find the answers, but they just aren't used to looking.
Mm.
They just assume that's a terrible event. And we go around and label events and we are traumatizing ourselves by labeling events as bad or traumatizing.
Of
There are
course.
just events. And what
Mhm.
you bring to the table, as Milton said, you can make the heaven out of a hell or a hell out of a heaven by thinking makes it so. We have the
Right.
capacity to change our perception, our decisions, and our actions at any time. So
Mhm.
the third question is, go to a moment where and when you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating the trait you dislike, despise, or hate most. At
Mhm.
that moment, in that moment, what were the benefits? And what were the upsides? And what were the advantages? And how did that catalyze growth in you? And how did it benefit you? And if you
Mhm.
stack up the benefits,
Mhm.
you'll find out they were there the whole time and you overlooked them. You're
Mhm.
subconsciously stored the pain, but you didn't look for the benefits.
Yes.
Now, we also have things like this when we admire people. When you
Mhm.
infatuate with somebody and you see only the
Yeah.
positive side, you don't see the
Of
downside.
course.
A day, a
Of course.
week, a month, a year, or 5 years later, you find out that they're not who you thought.
Oh.
It's a fatal attraction.
Mm.
It's Glenn
Mhm.
Close and Michael Douglas.
Glenn
So when
Close and
all of a
Michael
sudden
Douglas.
you realize that they are not positive without negative or negative without positive. They're just
Yeah.
a human being, an
That's it.
individual with both sides. And you,
Mhm.
with your fantasy, created the delusion that they were going to give you a positive without a negative, a nice without a
Yes.
mean. Not going to
Yes.
happen. There is no such thing. There's
Never.
no hero without a
Never.
villain.
At
And
all.
the
At
real
all.
master in life is the one that embraces their hero and villain and embraces the two side of the two illusions of themselves and
Of
integrates
themselves.
them into a true authentic self.
I was going to say that as well. A master villain, not just externally, the people around us, but there is a master, a villain, and a hero inside all of us, and it's about
All of
mastering
us.
that side. All of us, and mastering that side. Now it kind of goes full circle into our moral hypocrisies, right? Because we all want to be heroes. We're always the good guy in our minds. How can we be a villain? It does not exist. Impossible.
No,
It's
you can't make it to the top of the game. We have a crazy politicians going on in America, as you probably read about. We got, and Trump is both a hero and a villain.
mm,
As you go
mm,
up, the higher you go, the more evident the hero and the villain becomes. And if you are
mm.
not willing to embrace your hero and villain, don't expect to rise to the leadership because
I
that's
love
going
that.
to take that.
Very interesting. And that's a great perspective right now for our audience of listeners because as a boss, as an employer, we've always have the perspective to be nice. But I think the ruthless, cutthroat side of it is also quite important.
You have to be all the above. As
Mhm.
Nietzsche said and Machiavelli said in The
Nietzsche.
Prince, you have to be able to be both. And if
Mhm.
you can't, because there's pairs of opposites of value systems out there. And
Right.
what one person believes in, pro-life, there's a pro-aborter, pro-guns,
Mm,
anti-guns. There's always a pair of
mm,
opposites. If you can't unify the pairs of opposites, one side of the opposite's going to distract you. But if you
right.
can embrace both sides, then you don't have to run from any part of yourself or seek a fantasy about
That's
yourself.
it.
You can
Oh,
honor both
fascinating.
sides.
That's it. I love that. I love that. You honor both sides, so you don't have to be seeking either of them. You can honor. Ah, I love that.
See, the Buddha said the source of suffering is the perception, the pursuit of that which is unobtainable, and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable.
Yes,
That's the pursuit of
that's
suffering.
it. That's it. It's just it is quite apparent in society today that we're constantly seeking all these things that are trying to we're trying to seek both, and it's just suffering all the way around, suffering for everyone. Doctor, of course, again, thank you for recapping those three questions. You mentioned 80 other questions, and of course, we don't have time to go through those 80 questions, but I understand, Doc, you also have what you call the DeMartini method, which is an approach, a completely different approach to transforming personal behavior, mastering personal behavior. Are the 80 questions included in that DeMartini method, and
Yes.
how does it compare to the traditional psychological approach?
Well, most psychology, I won't say
Mhm.
all, but
Okay.
most psychology is the victim model. You have a
Of course.
perpetrator,
Yes.
innocent victim,
Yes. Hmm.
predator, prey. I call it
Hmm.
a zoology because it's a zoo of animals.
Yes. Yeah.
And you're basically, because it's meant for the masses, and the masses of people basically are wanting to avoid pain and seek pleasure, right? They're
Yes.
controlled
Yes.
by the external circumstances.
Hmm.
So the majority of people are that. So psychology is meeting that need with a demand,
Hmm.
and it sells the idea that you're an innocent victim and you're a perpetrator.
Yes.
I don't have that. The DeMartini method, which is the 80 questions, does not acknowledge the idea of victim mentality. And
Wow.
here's why.
Why?
Because what we've done, we've worked with people that have been through almost every imaginable victimization, right? Traumas and rapes and you name it. And what we find is that there's an underlying hidden order of why these events are occurring in these people's lives. And
Yes.
asking the question and revealing that helps them no longer be traumatized by the event, but actually empower them to see the hidden order and to be able to move through that and see it on the way, not in the way. Because they can stay stuck for years running their story and being victims of history, or they can transform their perception, become masters of destiny. I'm only
That's
interested
it.
in helping people see the hidden order and become masters of destiny. That's it. That's been my objective since I was 18. And I'm 70
Wow.
here in just a couple months.
Well, Doctor, you have definitely transformed yourself or mastered this path, and it's a fascinating message to teach everyone. You put it in such a I love how you put it in such a scientific way as well, and that you are now preaching it in the way that people that it will help people uncover and unravel their lives. When it comes to personal behavior, it's really a difficult challenge, right? But you've mastered this again for 20, 50 years rather. You've mastered human behavior like it's decoding a complex puzzle. If we are to use the puzzle analogy here, Doc, what would be the key pieces that would allow it to come together? If there was a few essential pieces in there that we need, maybe something that we need to do every day, a trait that we need to have in our lives, how do we put this complex puzzle together?
Well, I love the use of the I call it the cosmic puzzle, because every day
Mhm.
I'm looking for another piece to put together in the cosmic puzzle. Heraclitus, the
Mhm.
philosopher that goes back around 2,600 years ago,
Mhm.
talked about the unity of opposites.
Mhm.
And the unity of opposites says whatever perception, the opposite perception was also present, but you were unconscious of one side. But in order to have the perception, the other side had to be there by contrast. It's called the law of contrast.
I love
So, in other
contrast.
words, in order to know warm, you have to know cold.
Of course.
And this is what Wilhelm
Important.
Wundt was trying to say.
I
So,
see.
that means that the mind is
Mhm.
fooled by the subjective experience of skewing and distorting the reality and creating an emotional response of seek or avoid. But in
Mhm.
actuality, the mind had the awareness of both, but one was unconscious. One was subthreshold, and it was a graded potential in the nervous system, and one was a superthreshold, which created an
Super
action
threshold.
potential. So what happens is we are unaware of the other half of what's there, and that's what we call chaos. That's the missing information that we call chaos. Once we
Right.
become aware by asking the right question, we see both sides, we see the hidden order, and we don't have missing information. See, at the
Right.
level of our authentic self, nothing's missing. At the level of our false self, our imposter self, we have information that's missing. And
I
that's what
see.
leads to the subjective biases, the in-group, out-group biases, and all the judgments and biases and
Mm-hmm.
prejudices in
Mm-hmm.
the world. So
Mm-hmm.
as long as we are basically holding on to the subjective bias, we're going to be misinterpreting reality, and then we're going to respond with that misinterpretation and create
Mm-hmm.
a vicious cycle in our lives, which we call
Mm-hmm.
depression, etc.
Yep.
So what I do is I make people ask the right question and balance
Right.
out their mind and see both sides. So if that means if somebody is criticizing you, I look for
Right.
who it is that you're comparing them to that's praising you. It's
Right.
either in reality or virtual reality, but your mind won't have one without the other. There's a thing called an anti-memory. And they found out in Neuron Magazine, March 17th, 2016, they
Mm-hmm.
published an article showing that in order to have homeostasis and balance in the brain has to create an anti-memory to counterbalance whatever is there, which shows that there's
Interesting.
a unity of opposites.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's also part of a homeostatic mechanism in the brain.
Yes, of course.
Homeostasis means that whenever we get perturbed by subjective interpretations of
Yes.
reality, we have a counterbalancing force coming in to balance it.
Yes,
So
of
we
course.
know that the excitation and inhibition ratios in the brain always are trying to keep in balance. So we
Mm-hmm.
create, in a sense, in a virtual world, information in
Mm-hmm.
our brain to counterbalance it. But we never ask the question. We just make people victims of things because of moral hypocrisies and not hold them accountable to look for the other side in their brain, to see both sides simultaneously, liberate them from their misinterpretation of reality.
Wow, doctor. First of all, it truly is a complex puzzle. But right now, it's we cannot. It seems that the hardest part is coming up with that, is accepting that balance. I mean, you mentioned homeostasis. You mentioned
The Taoist yin and yang has been teaching it in China for centuries.
exactly,
In Christianity, they
exactly
called it equanimity. In
equanimity,
Gestalt, they called it equilibrium.
equilibrium.
In Jungian, they called it synchronicity.
Mm-hmm.
All the way through the ages, I can show it in Egypt as Tum. I can show
Mm-hmm.
it in the teachings of Aristotle as the golden mean.
Mm-hmm.
There's been great teachers all the way through. It's called the synthesis of the dialectic by Hegel and by Zeno.
Mm-hmm.
It has been referred to by great minds throughout the centuries. It hasn't been
Mm-hmm.
new. But what
Mm-hmm.
happens is the majority of people want a quick fix, and they want a
That's true.
pleasure without a pain, and they seek a
Mm-hmm.
fantasy, and they live in a distorted reality, and then they wonder why they suffer. It's
Yeah.
not that it's not there. The information's always been, but the truth
Mm-hmm.
has never been in the hands of the masses. It's always in the hearts of the masters. The question is there's a master inside everyone. All
Mm-hmm.
they have to do is begin to ask a new set of questions, and their life changes.
And again, these set of questions are all in the DeMartini method. Of course, the course is up on your website, Doctor. There are so many other courses on here. There's you break down human behavior, personal behavior, dealing with grief, dealing with anxiety, and like you said, the cycle, the vicious cycle that we put ourselves in. Doc, there's a lot here on your website. Are there any essentials here that you would love to recommend? And I think to get us all started off in this transformational journey.
Yes, if there's anything that, in my opinion, is wise to start with, is knowing that your evaluation of the world is based on the hierarchy of your values. On my
Values.
website, drdemartini.com, there's a value determination process. I've been studying values
Mm-hmm.
46 years, and most of the information I've studied on values has been basically the ought, not the is. How we ought to be based on a moral illusion about society's expectation of you instead of how you are. So on
Mm.
my website is an objective evaluation of what do you do with your life and how you're responding according to what your real values are, not what you think they should be, but what they actually are.
What
That's
they
a
actually
starting
are.
point because that's what you're
Ooh,
filtering your whole world with. Your
it is.
perception, decisions, and actions are all based on your values. Starting there is the cornerstone. That's the first step in anything. It's a free, private evaluation. It takes 30 minutes of your time. It's 13 questions. It's eye-opening. And it'll make you look at what you're really doing, not what you think you ought to be doing. And it's really quite an eye-opening thing. That's a starting point that I tell people.
That's it right there. So, of course, you can go check that out at drdemartini.com/values. Doctor, you talk about values now, and now that we're here at that point of that conversation, our personal values determine so much of our lives, but there are also universal values. And again, this can be chaotic. And this is somehow that what you're trying to uncover as well, what you've dedicated your entire life in uncovering. Doctor, our personal values and the universal laws intertwine to create empowerment, to create fulfillment. How do we begin to start uncovering those aspects in our lives and really apply it for an overall better well-being?
Well, universal laws are unviolatable. Human laws are unlivable. Humans make up and they attempt to approximate, though with subjective bias, a set of rules for society. And if you look through time and space, you will find they vary.
Right.
And the idea of looking for a universal value system has been vague. I'm writing a textbook on the history of morality right now. I'm in the middle of it. I'm about halfway through. And I assure you, the idea of universal values are murky. So universal laws exist, but human values are based on the fear of death and the perpetuation of life. Now, the universal laws don't attach to that. In nature, when you have a predator and prey, the predator eats the prey. In order for them to have life, the other one dies. And if they don't catch the prey, this one lives and they die. So life and death are in equilibrium in the universal laws. There's a conservation law of all energy and matter is conserved. But humans now have the fear of death. And as a result of their fear of death, they set up an artificial set of values on top of it. And those do not necessarily comply with the universal laws. They're attempts. They're trying to make people live according to the laws of nature. But as long as we have the fear of death, we're going to have distortion. And so as a result of that, we end up having morals that are basically ideals that people try to promote but can't live by at all times. And those are distortions. But we make those up for each culture and each time, and it changes. Marijuana was once negated and evil in the 1960s. Now it's accepted. They change. Sexuality has changed. Ambitions are changed. So these values of human beings and morals of human beings are murky at best, and they're localized. So I'm interested in the laws of the universe more so than local value systems and morals of different groups. I live globally. I live all over the world. I've seen people from 160 countries, and I've watched people in different modalities with different value systems. And I realize that humans are more than just any one local ideal.
Doctor, thank you so much for that. You of course you answered our question. You gave us a clear distinction now of the questions that we need to ask, the hidden order in the universe and in ourselves, and of course the universal laws and the laws of man. Doc, it's been a fantastic insight. I wish I could have you longer. I feel like we could talk for hours. Of course, I would love to welcome our audience and listeners. Once again, the website is drdemartini.com. Start off with his values, of your own values/values. Go check that out. Doctor, this is more of a personal anecdote. As we start wrapping this up, you've been living on a boat for 23 years. Doctor, give us a little insight. Why decide to do that? Why have you been doing for so long? And what's life like living on a boat?
Well, it's actually a magnificent ship that I've been living since the 2001. I was living in Trump Tower right underneath the Donald in 2001. 9/11 occurred. My wife decided she didn't want to be in New York for a while, so we had some homes also in Australia. So she went over to one of our other homes in Australia and lived there. And I told her, I said, I'm not scheduled to speak in Australia, so I'm not going to see you. So we got to come up with plan B. So for an anniversary present, I thought that this ship would be an ideal present. So I bought in 2001. I bought my share of the ship. It's a collective group of about 100 people that own this ship. About 700 foot long. It's about 120 foot wide, and it's about 12 stories high, and it's a private 6-star luxury yacht. And so I've been living on this thing and circumnavigating the world for the last 23 years. And this is my primary residence. I've sold all my other homes. My wife passed away. I've sold all my other homes. They were, for a while, I turned them into real estate investments and rent them out for a while. But then eventually I stick mainly with stocks and bonds, investments. But I've been living on here for a long time. I spend about 90% of the time on here now. And I sometimes fly to go and do presentations live, but I do a lot on Zoom and on, the social media platforms.
Well, Doctor, of course, again, this has been fascinating. Your life has been fascinating. Your studies and everything that you've done, all very, very fascinating stuff. And I'm glad and I'm honored to have had you on the show. Of course, I apologize for downplaying it. I called it a boat. It's actually a magnificent, magnificent yacht. It's called the World. It is docked right now here, a few hours from me, a few hours away from me.
I'm really outside, right outside my window right here is Manila. I can see the downtown skyline, and I'm going to go into the city today. But I am very inspired because we had an attempt to do the show the other day, but I was in the middle of a typhoon.
Yes, I understand. I understand that, Doc.
We had connection problems, so we rescheduled it, and here we are right now in lovely Philippines. So I'm right outside the door.
Someday, Doc, I will take you up on that offer. I'd love to ride that, be on that ship with you, and maybe we could do another show, and we could do another.
We'll plan on it.
Absolutely, Doc. Thank you so much for being on the show. Of course, I invite our audience and listeners again, go check out Dr. DeMartini's website, drdemartini.com/values. Go start with there. Doc, do you have anything else? Where can we connect with you? You have a book out there. We'd love to read it. Anything else? How can we get in touch?
I've got about 46 books out there. If you just go look under books, DeMartini and books, you'll find plenty of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's lots of books out there. But just go to the website and just let your heart guide you, and just take advantage of it's an information website. There's a vast amount of information, thousands of interviews and information that I know will be helpful. My life's been dedicated to the mastery of life and to helping people master and expand their awareness and potential and do something extraordinary. That's what the website's for, to help you do that.
Fantastic. To all our audience and listeners out there, I invite you to do the same. I invite you to go check out that knowledge base and the richness of what Dr. John has dedicated his life to. Doc, I would definitely love to have you on again. Let's do this some other time again.
I'd love to.
I look forward to the same, and to all our audience and listeners out there. I am sure you guys will look forward to another episode as well to Dr. John. But thank you for watching this one. We will see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.